Michael Calvert, Director of Parks and Recreation, will make the introduction. And Mike, I again want to apologize ahead of time for us having to move you from our last meeting.
No problem. I know you guys had a hectic and busy meeting, so I appreciate just having the opportunity to be here. We've worked on the outdoors plan now for going on close to 18 months. I appreciate Council Lady Barbara Henley and Councilman Bobby Dyer being our liaisons to the Outdoors Committee. They've done a really, really good job. Our open space and outdoors plan has been presented to the Parks and Recreation Commission, the Open Space Committee, and many others within the community, and we've received really positive feedback, and we can't wait to share it with you and get some feedback from you all. So it's my pleasure to introduce Barbara Duke. Barbara Duke's been with our city for many years, 27 to be exact, and whether you know it or not or have heard.
Before she even got out of high school.
I think so.
Barbara.
But this is kind of her last shindig. She's going to be retiring at the end of August, early September. So she's been a great advocate for open space within the city. It's been a pleasure to work with her for all these years in Parks and Rec. So, Barbara, floor is yours.
We're glad to have you.
Well, I'm very happy to be here today to give you an overview of the 2016 update of the Virginia Beach Outdoors Plan. So this plan replaces the 2008 version of the Outdoors Plan, and these are some of the reasons why we do the Outdoors Plan. We try to update it every 6 to 8 years, and the plan really helps us as a department internally to manage our park system. And the Outdoors Plan is also an implementation tool for the comprehensive plan. So these are the topics that I'm going to cover today, and I will touch on all 5 chapters in the Outdoors Plan. So our parks are really very powerful community builders. Parks are a central reason why people want to move to Virginia Beach and why they stay here to live, work, and play. Our city park system is often cited as one of the best in the state. Properties that are near parks have higher property values. In a 2010 report by the Trust for Public Land that was done for Virginia Beach, they estimated the park effect multiplier on home prices in Virginia Beach was 3.26%. Well-planned and well-designed parks and public spaces also add real economic value to the surrounding community, as witnessed by our oceanfront beach and boardwalk that's considered by many to be a large public park, and the economic benefits of that public space are shared throughout the city. So we have a very large and diverse park system. Outside of the resort area, we have over 7,000 acres of parkland that we manage. And the Outdoors Plan helps us to manage this complex system in a sustainable way, and we add quality to the life of every citizen every day. Our citizens frequently visit our parks. We had 3 million visitors, close to 3 million visitors last year. So in Chapter 3 of the plan, we review our existing facility assets and our park land assets. And through that analysis, we found that the majority of our facilities are in line with our current and future needs, with 2 exceptions. We have a surplus of tennis courts in our neighborhood parks, and we have a deficit in rectangular field spaces throughout the city. So the plan contains recommendations to better align these facilities with the needs over time. Our overall park system is aging. We just celebrated the 60th anniversary of our parks. Renovation and maintenance projects make up the majority of our CIP. So this plan identifies the need for more robust renovation and maintenance funding and includes specific projects that will require additional funding in the future. The plan also addresses the continuing need for new park development. So when we looked at our park land inventory, we found that our greatest need is for new park spaces within strategic growth areas. Since 2008, 8 strategic growth area plans have been adopted by the Planning Department, and each of these plans includes multiple references to creating new park space as an essential part of these growing urban areas. So these three specific actions listed here from the plan will help to create the more collaborative climate that will be necessary to develop these new park spaces in the SGAs. So we have added 3 new park types to our inventory in anticipation of new parks within the SGAs, and I want to go over each new type with you. The first SGA park type is the town green, and this is a central park and gathering space within an urban development area. Town greens are typically publicly owned, rectangular spaces, often occupying an entire development block. Town greens are green, with 80 to 90% of the surface area covered with lawn and landscape planting. Parking for town greens is on adjacent streets or within nearby parking garages. So typical amenities on a town green can include an outdoor stage, an open play area, tree groves, picnic shelters. Neptune's Park at the oceanfront is a local example of a town green. These are other examples. Next is the urban plaza, and this can be thought of as a smaller, more intimate version of a town green. We do have several plazas now, and plazas can be hardscape or include lawn and landscape areas. And plazas can be located on public or private property. So typical amenities for urban plazas include seat walls, benches, pedestrian lighting, and public art. And plazas that include natural landscape features or waterfront vistas can be valuable to creating a vibrant, walkable community in other parts of our city outside of the oceanfront resort area. Water is a welcome amenity in any park, large or small. This Eco Garden Park type combines stormwater management areas with park spaces. The Eco Garden Park is not a one-size-fits-all design, and each space will be highly unique based on the stormwater requirements, the surrounding uses, and the space available. These spaces can help bring nature into the city and also improve the walkable environment. And so like urban plazas, eco gardens can be built on public or private property. So one way to think of this eco garden concept is as green infrastructure, which is a concept that's promoted in the comprehensive plan. And this is a diagram from Savannah that shows a network of park spaces that was planned with that city. And so if you can imagine for a minute that in Virginia Beach, a network of park spaces such as this could also be designed with stormwater management facilities. If parks and stormwater are integrated into the same space, less land is necessary overall to accommodate the two uses on separate sites. So it helps to increase the utility value of scarce public land. These are some statistics that show the value of the stormwater benefits that are already being generated by our park system, and these benefits will only increase if and when we build eco garden parks. Chapter 4 begins with addressing the future of our existing park buildings and park sites. We're very excited about the 2 new buildings that are currently underway, the Parks and Recreation Administration Building and the Kempsville Rec Center, and those will address large areas of need. But this slide shows a few of the future building issues for our department. In 2017, when the new admin building is complete, the citywide building on Lynn Haven Parkway will be vacated, and this site must be repurposed. We also need to plan for relocating maintenance buildings and yards in the Witch Duck area and the resort area. And most importantly, we need to develop strategies to modernize several of our recreation centers that are now over 20 years old. The Outdoors Plan also includes many future projects for our park system. Some of these are renovation projects or retrofit projects, and some are for new improvements. Most of these projects are not funded and will need to be programmed with future capital budgets. We continue to work on developing Princess Anne Commons Athletic Village to become a regional sports destination. And this fall, we will begin working with citizens to design a new community park known as Woodbridge Park, located on the new section of Lynn Haven Parkway in Centerville. These are just some examples of some of the park amenities that are in high demand that we will try to add during park development or renovation projects. So future parkland acquisition is also a vital part of our future park system and will be focused on 3 key areas. In the past, we had the open space acquisition program, which was very successful, and we've developed a lot of new parks from that program. This is sort of a scaled-down version of the program, and we have 3 focus areas. So I've already touched on the need for new park spaces within the strategic growth areas, and in Chapter 4 of the plan, there are specific park acquisition opportunities identified for the Pembroke and Newtown SGAs. 2 other need areas discussed in Chapter 4 of the plan are new water access sites and new neighborhood park spaces in older neighborhoods of medium to high density that currently lack park space within walking distance of homes. So these are our 4 high priority neighborhood park need areas. And except for area number 1, all of these neighborhoods share a border with the strategic growth area. So greenways and blueways can be a great way to provide water access. And I want to thank the City Council for all your support of the Thalia Creek Greenway near Town Center, because that greenway is going to be an awesome recreational asset for all the new residents that live there. And we are also excited about the new initiative that is included in the comprehensive plan known as the Green Sea Blueway and Greenway. So we are highlighting the Green Sea in our plan. And the Green Sea concept is really just an evolution of the planning ideas for preservation and conservation of the natural and agricultural resources in the southern part of the city that have been part of our comprehensive and park plans for decades. So, working with the planning department, we developed this map to illustrate the potential for developing an ecotourism focus for the North Landing River watershed, also known as the Green Sea. So the shaded tan area, that's our focus area for the Green Sea. This map shows the framework of existing significant places that fit into this concept as nodes. So the orange stars are community nodes, and those are located at the villages of Pungo and Creeds. The blue stars are water access nodes, and those are well-known private marina and boat ramps. Purple surf and turf recreation nodes represent parks and campgrounds where land-based and water-based recreational activities occur. And you can see the northernmost purple star is Pungo Ferry Park. The pink node is identified as a future small business opportunity area located along the northwestern border of the Green Sea area in the vicinity of Indian River Road and Salem Road. So it's not a star, it's this pink area there. We also consider this a gateway to the Green Sea area. So this fall, the planning department is taking the lead on a new effort to master plan the ITA area, which overlaps with the Green Sea area along this Indian River corridor where the pink properties are. So we will continue to work with them to flesh out the very preliminary concept of the Small Business Opportunity Node and the Green Sea Gateway. We are also working with the City of Chesapeake and Currituck County in North Carolina on regional initiatives to encourage recreation and ecotourism as primary economic drivers in the Green Sea area. Our bold vision is to develop diverse recreation areas and sustainable small-scale business opportunities that will one day create a popular, thriving regional recreation destination that protects and showcases the environment and is compatible with the rural agricultural character that exists today. So Chapter 5 of the plan includes an overview of park operations and provides recommendations for capital improvement planning. And one of the most important recommendations is to work with management services to restore an annual open space funding so that we can make the most of acquisition opportunities as they arise. We will also be bringing forward new projects in the coming years which will require additional funding over current target funding levels. And we understand that these projects are always need to be balanced with other parks and recreation needs and city council priorities. As I have shown you throughout this presentation, the Outdoors Plan is an important companion document to the comprehensive plan. There are many projects and initiatives discussed throughout the plan that tie directly to the goals outlined in the comprehensive plan. We are committed to developing projects that meet multiple outcomes. We will continue to communicate, cooperate, and collaborate with other city agencies, citizens, and businesses to create projects that will implement your vision for our city. So these are the topics that I've gone over today. The plan is scheduled to be brought to you for a vote on August 16th as an amendment to the comprehensive plan. Are there any questions?
Questions from council? John?
Just one, I noticed, go ahead, Amelia.
Oh, mine is just short. We brought up some recommendations, as you remember, from that Elizabeth River.
Yes.
Of looking at them doing a grant.
Yes. That is in the plan. I didn't highlight it in the presentation, but we have information in the plan about water access and potential water access sites we have identified along the Elizabeth River is really our focus for this plan. And we are working, I think the Elizabeth River project did submit that grant, so we'll see if they get that.
Thank you.
John?
My question was going to go to the number of religious institutions in our community that sit on a substantial amount of green space with their property. Many of it's rectangular and often used for recreational purposes, usually by younger children rather than the older children. And I noticed we didn't really account for that as, like you said, private green space, but that is a substantial portion of green space. I also think we probably need to take into consideration inventory of all the green space that's on the military installations, which they use for recreational purposes, not only for the people that are stationed, but also people who use it for other purposes who live out in the community. So I think we actually have a lot more recreational space than we've accounted for. And I think there's opportunities to reach out more to some of the churches, maybe or other institutions in a more structured way to increase the accessibility of some of that space for, especially for the younger children's soccer, where more of that's done in the day. Because I know people don't like lights, because I know we've had issues with lights and the engines, but there's a lot of, but that is a lot of space that is out in the community, and I think we, at some point, ought to account for that.
We do have a lot of that mapped, and we actually can put statistics out, including that, and, you know, we can do any kind of arrangement of space. We can evaluate it. But basically, those 4 neighborhoods that I showed you that are the high need areas really are, even including all of that other space that's not necessarily public space. Those are still need areas.
I would just, if you wouldn't mind, later to get that additional GIS data and just see that. Because
Okay.
just my own expression from driving around in the Pembroke area, I'm very familiar with the churches and also the places, and even our own neighborhood, as you know, Louis, there's 3 churches. There was a substantial amount of green space property. So I'm kind of
Okay.
interested as to how that calculation is done.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments? Barbara?
Well, a comment about Barbara is going to leave another big gap. I just want to say how much I've enjoyed working with her and appreciate the vast knowledge she's got and what she has helped to make happen with, particularly with the open space, but all of the outdoor things over the years. But the one that I think of the most often is putting that Pleasure House Point deal together. I know Barbara worked tirelessly to make that happen, and amazing that she can find
Who'd
the
ever
grant
thought?
monies here and there, so.
Good work.
It's been great.
The stars lined
Thank
up.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Barbara, Barbara, I speak for the entire council. Thank you for the great job you've done. I hope you walk away from this city feeling proud of your accomplishments, because I'm going to tell you, everyone at this table is very proud of our outdoor plan in this city, and you were a big part of it, so we thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll move on. Being as Barry Frankenfield just ran in here, we're going to ask Barry to make the introductions on the National Flood Insurance Community Rating System and Regional Hazard Mitigation Plan.
All right,
Barry?
Thank you very much, and it's again your lucky day, because I'm not going to be talking very long. But Whitney McNamara's with us, and she's been with the department about 4 years. She's a certified floodplain manager. She was very involved in the update of our regional floodplain information. She's our go-to person on every kind of environmental issue that we come up with. We also have Erin with us today for the tough questions, and thank you very much, and go right ahead. You're doing a great job.
Whitney, we're glad to have you here, and Aaron, it's always good to have you here. We prefer to see you in these circumstances instead of the hurricanes. Thank you very much.
The Weather Channel.
Yeah, yeah.
So as Barry indicated, I'm going to give you an update on our community rating system and where we are in the process for that. So just for a bit of brief background, the National Flood Insurance Program was created in 1968 as a mean to help property owners, renters, and business owners obtain flood insurance, since that's not covered by your standard homeowner's insurance policy. In return for providing flood insurance, local governments must agree to adopt and enforce a local floodplain management ordinance, which we do have. So Virginia Beach flood insurance statistics, we joined the National Flood Insurance Program really early on in 1971. We currently have over 23,000 policies, over $6 billion in insurance coverage, and our residents collectively pay over $12 million a year in flood insurance premiums. To put that into perspective, we have the highest number of flood insurance policies in the Commonwealth, and we're the second highest in FEMA Region 3, which is Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Virginia, and the other highest is Ocean City, Maryland. So to move into the community rating system, it was created in 1990 to provide certain flood insurance policyholders discounts on their flood insurance premium in exchange for policies and programs that local governments are doing to help reduce the community's collective flood risk. Participation is entirely voluntary by the local government, and communities earn points for the different activities that they're doing in 4 broad categories related to floodplain management. So that's under public information, mapping and regulations, flood damage reduction, and flood warning and response. So under the CRS program, every 500 points is a class. Every class is a 5% reduction in your premium. So 500 points, and that's supposed to be 999 points, would be a 5% reduction. At a 5% reduction in Virginia Beach, our policyholders would see an estimated reduction of a little over $448,000. At 10%, we would see a reduction of $793,931, and a 15% reduction would see a price of $1,139,512 saved. And that's distributed across the policyholders, depending on how much they're paying for their individual policy. It would be 15% off of their individual policy. Now in Virginia, there are 22 communities that are currently participating in the community rating system. 4 are Class 9, 12 are Class 8, 4 are Class 7 and 2, Alexandria and Fairfax County are a Class 6. So as you can see, it's pretty difficult to get up to some of those higher classes. There's currently only one community out in California that's a class 1 right now. In Hampton Roads, there are 8 communities that are currently participating. They're listed on your right, and you can see their classes. Norfolk is in the process of upgrading to a class 7, and I found out last week Portsmouth is also in the process of upgrading to a class 7. And then Newport News is not in the program yet, but they're in the process of joining. So as we move forward, there are definitely things we need to consider before joining the program. The biggest thing is we're already doing many of the activities that earn points as part of the community rating system. Some examples are we have 2 feet of freeboard for all new construction and substantial improvements to existing construction located in the floodplain. As you just heard from Barbara Duke, we have a robust open space program. A lot of that open space is located in the floodplain, so we would get points for that open space. Also, we would get points for GIS mapping, different things emergency management is doing, multiple different things we're already doing. Based off of what we're already doing, we would most likely be joining as a Class 8 community, which would be a 10% discount for residents. Progression to a Class 7 would take minor investments and modifications to existing programs and processes. However, progression beyond a Class 7 would likely take a major commitment on our behalf and a major investment by the city to get up to those higher levels. One thing, when we were pulling this report together with Public Works and Planning, there is some staff time that's needed for the annual record keeping, the initial application process, and an annual recertification package that would need to be submitted. So our recommendation in that 2015 policy report was to create one new full-time position to help manage that program. As with any program, there's also some risks involved that need to be weighed out in careful consideration. One of the largest risks is our repetitive loss and severe repetitive loss properties. We currently have 573 plus in the city, and those are the ones that just have flood insurance. Currently, under the community rating system, we're not required to actually go out and mitigate those properties. We're just required to have a plan for how we would mitigate them as funds are available. There's a modest effort underway through FEMA elevation grants. I think we've received grant monies for 29 at this point. But as you can see, compared to 573, that's a very small portion of them. There's also a future risk from sea level rise and an increased frequency of storms that could increase that number of properties. So should this program ever be modified where we'd be required to mitigate the properties, that could be a substantial investment that we'd be facing if we wanted to continue in the program. The second large risk that we need to consider is there's the requirement to have a floodplain management plan. Currently, the Regional Hazard Mitigation Plan is a perfectly acceptable means of having that floodplain management plan. However, again, if FEMA ever changed the CRS requirements and required a separate standalone floodplain management plan, it would be a major undertaking of staff time and funding to develop that plan. So those are just some of the things that need to be considered on as we weigh this out.
Can I interrupt you 1 second, John?
Yeah, can you
Yeah,
go back to that?
I can go back.
So for the repetitive loss, I mean, when it says that we would be required, could be required
Could
to
be.
do that, at our cost, or is that we just have to participate in the mitigation, or?
I don't really know how that would potentially look. It could be something like you're required to mitigate 10% of your repetitive loss properties every year, just to throw a number out there. I think that would be up to us how to do that. I don't know. It could be through grants. It could be private homeowners. We do have some private homeowners that are saying, well, I'm flooding. I want to put an addition on my house. I'm just going to go ahead and elevate my entire house. So
Not a current requirement.
no, it is not a current requirement. So
But the concern is that if we're in the program, that the program may change.
Right.
And then at that point in time, we're in. And we've
right,
gotta
we're
do what
in.
they
So it's
say.
either a choice of we drop that discount to residents and leave the program, or we start spending the money to actually mitigate these properties.
Thank you.
John?
I was going to, because when you read that analysis, it said the underlying design of this program by the feds, when you read the legislation, was to shift the risk and the cost to local government. So
Right.
you just need to know that is the explicit legislative purpose of this program.
And the two mitigations, just to pile on the councilman, is you either elevate, or as we've been doing with the severe repetitive loss grant program that we briefed you on about a month ago, for what, the fourth grant, or you gotta buy them out and turn it into unused and you can't repurpose it.
Open space.
So it becomes open space and remove it from the tax rolls.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely something to consider. So if we do move forward, there's several steps that we'd have to go through. The first step is the adoption of the Regional Hazard Mitigation Plan. That will most likely be later on this fall. At the same time, we need to finalize updates to our repetitive loss list. There's a form we can fill out every time a property is mitigated to get it removed from that list, so we just have to get all of that up to date. We also need to finish finalizing actions for compliance with the NFIP. We had a community assistance visit back in 2012 that identified several things that we've been working through to address. Once the hazard mitigation plan is adopted, the next step would be to send it up to FEMA to review it. As I said, we're required to have this floodplain management plan. So we want to make sure before moving forward that the hazard mitigation plan qualifies as a floodplain management plan. Once we get the okay on that of, yes, this is good to go, it's a floodplain management plan, we would need to schedule a community assistance visit with FEMA, which is where they come into our community, they review our permitting records, they drive around the community and see how it actually plays out in our local community and how buildings are elevated or constructed, and see if there's any other programmatic issues that we need to work on addressing. If everything's okay, we would receive a letter of compliance. If it's not, they send us a list of these are the things you need to fix and here's the time frame for fixing them. So we would have to fix those issues before moving forward. Once we have our letter of compliance, we officially have 6 months at that point to apply to join the community rating system. And that's basically a letter stating that Virginia Beach wants to join the community rating system and has appointed whoever we appoint as our CRS manager as the CRS manager. Then you enter into a series of visits with FEMA and to review the program, review the things we're trying to seek points for, and it's a lot of back and forth to get everything validated. This is typically an 18 to 24 month process because the visits have to be scheduled and things have to be advertised in the Federal Register, which is a 6-month lead time just to advertise in the Federal Register. So this is not a fast, easy, we call them tomorrow and say, hey, we want in CRS and we're in. It takes a little bit of time to get in. So those would be the steps that we'd be looking forward at. So to date, I shared again in your package on Friday the policy report that went out last year. Since that time, we've spent a lot of effort updating the Regional Hazard Mitigation Plan. Right now, there's a draft plan currently in the public comment phase. There's links out on our website to do the public comment survey. Once all of those comments are compiled and the plan's ready to go, it will end up coming back to you all for adoption. So as I said, hopefully that'll be later this fall. In addition, there's been ongoing work by the planning department to resolve some FEMA compliance issues from the last community assistance visit. Right now, everything's been addressed except for some issues that they brought up related to our campgrounds, which those were an ongoing issue, especially down in Sandbridge where we had over 250 units that need to come into compliance. So we've been working through that. Also, in the meantime, we've gathered and prepared all the application documents and materials. So if we do get to the point of applying and scheduling that visit, we're not scrambling to pull things together from different departments and create all the data that we need to apply. So that application package is pretty much ready to go at this point. So with that, I'll take any questions you all have.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Questions from council members?
If I can add one thing,
Yes.
Mayor.
Please.
One of the things Whitney didn't say is that of the 26,000 policy holders that we have, this discount is not applicable to all those. Would you
Right.
please explain to the council what the division and how many we have and how
Definitely.
many would actually benefit from this? Because I think there's a misunderstanding of what the total benefit will be.
So out of our policy holders, approximately half of them are what's called a preferred risk policy holder. Those are people that live outside of our mapped floodplains. that are saying, I know I live in Virginia Beach. There's a really good chance I'm going to flood at some point. I want flood insurance. Those policyholders, because they're already receiving a very, very low rate for their insurance, would not be eligible for the discount. So the residents that would be eligible for the discount are the little over 9,000 policyholders that are located in the special flood hazard area. And the numbers that I provided up there, the 793,931, that is what the savings would be to those 9,000 policyholders in the special flood hazard area.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments, John?
In that special flood area, if you look at the mitigation plan, which I know you don't have in front of you, but that would be the areas in flooding zones AE through AVE, the ones that are blue
Yes,
on this map.
yes.
And my only other observation is, which I make consistently, is I understand this is workload that takes FTEs, but I've often said we have like over 250 vacancies easily at any one point in time. If this is really important, I'd like to think that somehow there's something that we're doing, or certainly that's not currently being recruited, that's less important than this. So I would hope that we wouldn't have to be increasing additional FTE in the overall budget. Every FTE carries with it a 42 cents on the direct dollar benefit cost. That's pretty high. That's much higher than industry. So we ought to be trying to minimize increasing additional labor costs. I hope we look for efficiencies and try to find some lower level FTE we could take risk in to do this on a one-time basis, because if we don't adopt the program, we don't have the full-time expense. And this thing clearly points out that the cost of doing the program is greater than the collective benefit received. So hopefully we wouldn't be charging this off of the stormwater management fee, because that means you're getting a direct benefit of the service, and clearly only a small base is getting a direct benefit. So
And a
those are
lot-
just my observations.
Yeah, and a lot of the costs associated with the program are those things, like, as I said, we have 2 feet of freeboard. So if you had to update your ordinance, there's a cost associated with that. If you're trying to do new GIS mapping layers, there's a cost associated with that. So that's when we did the original analysis. We really tried to stick with what can we currently get points for, because that should be no new expenditures because we're doing those things already.
Very good. Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Okay, David Trimmer. I bet you he's outside. I bet you he's heading this way.
While David Trimmer and our assessor Jerry Bannigan are coming in, this was put on your workshop to discuss some requested changes that have been discussed out in the community and by the Agriculture Advisory Board and requested. If you'll reach down and click on your little icon down there, David.
He's finding the icon. Let me just say that I had an opinion that I don't have a conflict, and that's
Okay.
if I participate in this discussion, since I'm considered an agricultural property owner, and that's been filed with the city.
Thank you. We welcome your discussion. Go ahead, Dave. Okay.
And the reason why we're bringing this forward today is because Jerry is working, and his team is working rapidly on the land book to get the calculations put together for the land book. And if this is acceptable to the council, it makes a lot more sense to do it now rather than decide after we've done all the calculations and then have to go back in and hand jam changes or possibly pull it all back and recalculate it. So we're trying to get out here in a timely manner based on input that we've had that this is.
Dave, glad to have you.
Thank you, sir.
Jerry,
Thank
glad
you.
to have you over here, Dave.
Thank you. Yeah, as Dave indicated, I think as Mrs. Henley indicated, this started in the out in the ag industry. Several of the farmers met together and they looked to identify the issue at hand, basically the increase in ag values. As you can look at 2009 to 2016, it's a significant increase of about $1,820. And as you can see, from 2016 to 2017, it's going to drop about 7%. But as we see, our per acre ag land value has gone up 300, 350, 470, and continues to increase. What the group proposes is we put a cap on that, the same cap that is on that represents our ARP ag value land, which is $1,800. That would provide stability to the market going forward, because we know right now, as of the 7% drop to 2017, it's probably going to continue to drop. Now, I think Jerry will touch on the SLEAC value, which is the State Land Evaluation Advisory Council at Virginia Tech. They're the ones that set the values for Virginia Beach and for the state. You don't, Jerry can touch on this, but we don't have to use that. That's the value we use. That's the process we use here. Virginia Beach is the 4th highest in ag land use in the state, cost-wise. Chesapeake is right below us, and Accomack, and then Northampton. So we are, again, the 4th highest in the state. Our goal from the farming standpoint and the farmers is basically to look to have that cap ceiling number on there to help us stabilize our variable expense going forward. And, you guys all know what's been going on with the commodity values. That's what drives these ag land values, corn, wheat, and soybean. When I look back 5 years from now, going in history, I know that corn, wheat, and soybean, as of today's price, is down $3 a bushel. All across the board for all 3 commodities, corn, wheat, and soybean. To give you an example, 2012, $6.08 a bushel for corn. Today it's $3.25 on the active market. Soybeans $13.53. It's $9.75. So that kind of gives you an idea of where we're at. So the farmers brought it. We took it to Farm Bureau, bounced it off the Farm Bureau, seeing what they thought of the proposed plan, because we'd like to also possibly have Chesapeake come in and see this as a value to them too. So Farm Bureau is behind it. Farm Bureau brought it to Mrs. Henley and the Ag Advisory and bounced it off her. And the recommendation from the Ag Advisory was to bring it to this group. Again, we weren't thinking of today, we're looking at the future as we go on down the road. And today's a great time to look at this. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jerry, and he can go into detail and from his standpoint.
Jerry, welcome.
This is the values that the state recommends for our farmland in Virginia Beach. The grains that he talked about in the past have affected it, and the state's data is a little old, so it takes a while to catch back up. So I think the values are going to start coming down slightly, but it may take a few years to get where the committee wishes to go. The state calculates a model farm based on the crops and the acreages that are produced in Virginia Beach. And then they do an income approach on that. They determine a value for Class 3 land, which is about 68% of our properties. The Class 1 and the Class 2 are 150% and 135% of that Class 3 value. We have 12,053 acres in Class 3. The tax on that per acre is $19.50. We have 4,300 acres in Class 2 at $26.33 per acre tax, and 1,400 acres in Class 1 with a $29.30. If council decided to go with the proposed ceiling of $1,800, that would be a tax reduction of $73,200.
So if we follow this recommendation, that is the cost.
Yes, sir.
Any questions of Jerry? John?
I'm trying to, we still have to have some systematic methodological way of saying why that value is 1,800.
I think they chose 1,800 because that's the value of the appraiser that works with the city on the ARP program is established at land values after the take of any development rights.
True, but those properties have less value because they have less development potential, correct?
Yes.
So now, I'm just trying to look at the equity. We don't do this for homeowners, we don't do this for other businesses. So now we're saying people who otherwise are not in that program, who have a greater economic value of their property, get a tax base as if they were in a lower, and had given up that higher value. And we're gonna give them that value. That's what this says.
Barbara, did you want to respond
I
to that?
don't think it's the ARP properties, it's just the value that we identify
Yeah,
in
it's
the
not the
ARP
ARP, it's-
program. It's
yeah.
not the ARP properties.
Well,
It's farmland in general.
well, then I need to better that's a big difference to understand how we came to that value, and it's less than the market value.
You mean referring to the $1,800 seal?
Correct.
Yeah, that was set by the appraiser in 2009 to determine the ag value of land.
In 2009, well, that's a long time. This is 7 years later.
Yeah, we have just not done it since.
I don't know if this is right or if it's wrong. I have a hard time explaining to the public. We already have a program where we buy out people's development rights and give them money to preserve it. We've taken away $3 million worth, I didn't, but $3 million worth of benefit from senior citizens because we couldn't afford it. This is a small amount of money, but there's an underlying principle of a consistent approach to some kind of tax relief. And I'm having a hard time explaining to myself and therefore explaining to the public, you know, where there's some consistent thought process as we approach these things, because everybody can tell a story. I don't care who it is. There's a narrative that could get you to a different number than they're at today and what they pay. And right now, I'm just not comfortable that there's a narrative here that I can go out and tell the public why one class of people deserve a ceiling or some kind of approach and consideration for property tax purposes, and other people who earn their living in another way do not. I just don't have that narrative.
Barbara?
No, I think you're confused. It's not the ARP properties. And maybe you, if you put back the slide that David had, it's properties that are agricultural land and for the land use values in the land use taxation program. Agricultural properties are only one property that's in the land use values. There's forest land, and you just don't have those on that slide. The other properties, I mean, golf courses get a land use value and so forth. The other types of properties in the land use program have not really seen this fluctuation. This has to do with properties that are in the land use value program, and agricultural properties is one of them. And for that, it's this process that's called SLEAC, which is established by the state. They make a determination of what the agricultural value is. And one of the chief things that they use would be the products that are produced in that locality. And of course, for Virginia Beach, a lot of it, the vast majority is are the commodities. And it's their formula that determines the land use value for agricultural lands. Correct me anytime I'm saying something
It's
wrong.
essentially an income approach
An income approach
based
to
on
what
the crops and the acreages of those crops
Well, I
from Virginia
understood
Beach.
that.
And so this is for all agricultural properties. So it doesn't have anything to do with ARP.
I understand that.
Okay.
I backed off. I'm still coming back that we're suppressing the set value.
No, let me just explain. All right, they do this every year, and it's like a 7-year cycle that they use the highest and the lowest during this 7-year cycle. And this kind of reminds me of what happened in our real estate taxes when we were looking at the senior program. Because they used something that was just a bubble, just a, an unusual thing that caused this spike. But if you look at all of those other years, it stayed relatively the same because commodity prices stayed roughly the same. But when it had that spike in 2014, well, it started up in 2013, when the commodity prices got just way out of where they should have been, and we were grateful for it. But that caused this spike in the value of the land use program because they used those abnormally high commodity prices to determine that value. And so it went up from, 480 up to 23, I'm sorry, my vision is not that great, 2100. And when you look at that, that's what, a 1,700 per acre spike? When look at all those other years, it was down 300 or 400. It fluctuated some because the prices fluctuated some, but within $100 or so. Now it's way up there, much more, and it's an abnormality. And it's starting to come down now because it will take a while for that abnormal value of commodity prices to be worked through the system. So it's going to come down. And this year it will probably be down to 1970, and next year it should go down some more, and it'll get below 1800. But what the ag folks said was, if we could come up with a cap, we would look to the future and keep this from happening again. But the problem, a lot of the problem is, you know, with agricultural land values, and it's very important that we have the land value taxation program, or we wouldn't have an agricultural industry, because the taxes would take the profit, the per acre value of the profit. And so many people have agricultural land that are not farmers, but they lease their land to farmers. And when their taxes have gone up so much because of this assessment increase, you have an awful lot of folks who are paying half of what they're getting for land rent or more for taxes. So, you know, they're literally land poor. And it's the folks who are the property owners who are leasing to the farmers who are really complaining to the farmers that, hey, you know, I'm renting you my land, but I'm not getting anything out of it because I'm having to pay it all in taxes. And so this is the thing. It's you really have to look at how stable it was for 20 years, because I think ever since we've been in the land use program, since 1973 or something, we've used the SLEAC numbers, but they have stayed very steady until we had this real bubble. And so that's what has caused everything to be out of kilter, and it will come down. But they were just saying now might be the time if we could look at a cap. And so they suggested the 1800 as a cap, since we had that identified as the agricultural value of land by an appraiser in Virginia Beach, which we just happen to use an ARP. So that's the only connection with the ARP. But that's how they came up with suggesting that we might cap it at this 1800, just to keep this tremendous fluctuation from happening again and causing the values to be abnormal.
I
I would love to see the commodity prices get back up that high, but I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon.
You might be surprised.
I
It
would
wouldn't
love
take
to
much
be
of a drought on a
surprised.
worldwide basis and growth rate to over an Asian demand for incomes and food prices. Much drove most of the commodity prices was foreign purchases of food. So it's like, but I want to get back to my point, because I did understand the difference. In one case, people that weren't paying taxes have to pay it. That's the seniors, because of the bubble, whatever you want to call it. Here case, because of the bubble, people that have to pay it now won't be paying it. It's a tax expenditure. And I realize why you're doing it, but we just ought to acknowledge that we are insulating one segment from market fluctuations. We are not insulating everyone from market fluctuations, but their income doesn't go up, but their house value went up. And I know we saw people come down here that had that problem. We didn't level their house price because their home went up and their income stayed flat. We didn't protect them from market fluctuations, and you heard the people come down there and talk about it, especially that lady that was impacted by the dredging program. Because her income was flat, she lived there forever, but her house value was up, and now she was getting to have to pay that fee, even though she didn't want to. So there's lots of people we haven't insulated from market fluctuations, and I'm just telling you, maybe everybody's comfortable with it. I'm having a hard time understanding why this set of circumstances for protection against market fluctuations is more compelling than some other group in our community. Maybe you're comfortable with it. I'm just expressing, at this point in time, I am not.
Okay, we got a couple more comments. Jim Wood and then Rosemary. Rosemary?
We have a family farm in Southampton County, and just about a few weeks ago, we got this paper in the mail, and we lease our farm out. And we had to make sure that we were farming, and we had to say, you know, what we were farming and all of that. So it all had to be done because of, and it had been 7 years since we had to do it before, so they're doing the same thing we are of looking at it every 7 years. And we always hear about the rollback taxes because farmland is taxed at a lower rate. And if you sell, you've got to go back and pay those taxes that you got off the hook of because you were
You didn't get off the
farming your
hook, you
land.
got to pay them.
Huh?
You end up paying them.
Yeah, you end up paying them if you use your property for something else beyond the farming, but, you know, we're doing
Good
the same
point.
thing in Southampton County.
Let me understand, the cap is for how long? Permanently?
Well, until we choose to change it again.
Yeah, but I mean, we're doing a 7-year term look at
Right.
now.
Yeah, I guess that would
Because
be up to
my
us.
point to offset what John said, and I respect what he said, you know, I believe that number would get below the $1,800 number if you look at the numbers, the history there.
Yes, it will, and that's what they were thinking, it probably will, and so they suggested using the cap or the SLEAC value, whichever is less. So if the SLEAC value.
Mr. Mayor, if I
goes
could
back
enter-
down to 480 again, yeah, let's hope that commodity prices don't go that low.
If I could
anyway.
intercede, that chart's in my annual report every year. I'll be bringing it to you every March.
Right.
And you can see what's occurring. The seminar I just attended, representatives from Virginia Tech were there. And
Davis, this is just a briefing. What are you looking for from us?
Well, the attorney will tell you that the assessor sets the rate associated with this. He's used the traditional CLAC as a frame of reference for setting that, and at the request of the Agriculture Advisory Committee that we take a look at this because of the bubble of commodity. I thought maybe we might have seen some charts associated with the cost of corn and beans, and you could have seen where that bubble has made an income-based impact to those numbers that are on the screen behind me. And at the recommendation of that committee, they wanted to put a cap on it for now, and then, as Ms. Henley just said, establish a going forward policy that whichever is lower between the $1,800 or the SLEAC formula, that we would adopt that for the assessor to move forward with his calculations. Is that correct, Jerry?
Yes, sir. And as Dave said when we started, my interest in this was timing, because we're getting ready to create the land book. If we make a change after that, then myself and the treasurer will both have to hand touch all
So you're
900
recommending this?
Well, I'm bringing it to you for your information. It's what the Ag Advisory Commission recommends, and so it's really, of course, up to council, but I do think this is a very reasonable request.
When we bring it forward, then I guess we'll have to act on it, or
Well, I don't think so.
I'm not sure that there's action that's required. I think this is for information only. I don't think council can set a cap. I think it's my understanding, and Dana, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that it's the obligation of the assessor to make that determination. He's just telling you
Yeah, well,
how he's going about it and why.
I'm not going to object to it. Anybody? Let's move on. Thank you. All right,
I appreciate that, Mayor. Thank you.
our next one, Airbnb Ad Hoc
yes.
Committee
Can you find it on
discussion.
there?
You want to go make a presentation on this, someone else?
Yes, sir. I'm going to tag team this between
You're welcome.
Bob Mathias and my city attorney and myself. We're going to continue the conversation that we had last week, and maybe I'll just move to the podium to be out of your way. And we kind of left our discussion last week saying that we had two items. We're working with Beaches and Waterways on event homes, and we're expecting a finalization of their resolution and findings, recommendations, coming forward with a cover letter, in which case I will package that and get that out to the council for their review, and then the staff and I and the city attorney will look at that carefully and make some recommendations on top of that, and then we'll be back in front of you with regards to event houses. So this is really this online home sharing economy. Chose not to select one of the 40 different agencies that are out there online that are actually using this to rent their homes, Airbnb being one of those. So it was a consensus, maybe not everybody was fully cognizant of what we were thinking about, and that is the creation of an ad hoc committee from the largest city in the Commonwealth to to convene and I'll show you an agenda of what they might look at and what they might be discussing and conversing about. As you know, the General Assembly has asked the Housing Committee there to look at this issue at the state level. And I was asked by you a week ago what I thought we ought to be doing, and that was, I thought as the largest city in the Commonwealth, we ought to be formulating a position and making our recommendations known to that committee with regards to how we feel about this shared economy and what impacts it's having inside our city based on the local laws that we currently have in place. So with recommendations from the staff, we're pushing back to you to our recommendations of who a 12-member committee might be to take on this responsibility. Certainly, our Hotel Motel Association be concerned. We really don't have a VB Realtors Association. We have a Hampton Roads Association, but they are members from our city are part of that. And then, of course, Chamber of Commerce. We could have said one individual from each of the 7 council districts, but we thought maybe you might want to consider having a civic league board member from one of your civic leagues that's actually engaged in representing groups of people that may have heard or been concerned of that. And not designating which civic league you might pick, that would be a choice on your part, but this is just a recommendation from staff for you to decide how you want to proceed. I think you need to designate a chairman, and you might look to your leader here to pick someone to do that. And then the question that was raised, well, shouldn't we offer an opportunity for the online rental platform industry to put a representative on that, if we can get them to participate? I'm not sure where I go on my Rolodex to find that person or whether or not they're even available to do it, but I think that maybe you guys can help me if you have a point of contact to at least bring them in, because I think it would be fair to ask them to participate. Who will support this effort? Because it's a fairly, in order to, and you'll see my timeline, in order to make this occur in a timely fashion, to have some effect at the state level, we're going to need to have this. And of course, I would ask the commissioner to join this, to be a part of this and help support that. And I appreciate them being here today. So what would they do on their first meeting? And they would convene fairly quickly if we can get them appointed. I think the first thing you have to do is begin the education of what is this online home sharing economy, and where is it, and how is it functioning, and be able to describe, as in the same briefings that the commissioner and Bob brought to you in those double briefings last week, the same level of presentation so that they would be educated to do that. Then I think we would want to discuss our local regulations, and you should be aware that we convened, the staff and I and the city attorney and just a whole table full of staff folks got together, and we started to really toss amongst ourselves how much we really understood the whole short-term rental business that's going on in our city. And we're really taken off of Councilman Wood's question when he asked me, well, Dave, what about short-term rentals? And what about room rentals inside the city? So I kept this on the board from our conversation, a matrix that Doug Smith jumped up and said, hey, we need to get this on the board. On what we think in a simplistic manner, our zoning laws tell us that you can and really can't do. So here's a room rental column, and here's a whole house rental column, and here's short term, which is daily and weekly, and here's long term, which is longer than a week. And so in answer to your question, Councilman Wood, can I rent a room short term? And the answer is only if you are a bed and a breakfast or a country inn as specifically defined and within the zoning district, none of which are residential, could you actually rent out a room legally? And however, you could rent out the house on next to you for short term. And staying on this thought, we all of a sudden said in our conversation as a staff, what is the thorn in the bottom of our foot right now? It is the disruption to the stability of our neighborhoods, of our residential neighborhoods, and the concern and impact to those neighborhoods that you've heard the complaints that I bought my retirement home and now I have a living hell next to me. Well, that living hell is being generated short term by all of Dave Hansen's Kappa Sigma brothers coming up from Central Florida and having a week rental on that cul-de-sac because it's authorized to do that. It's not because one of Dave's Kappa Sig brothers from University of Central Florida came up and rented one of the rooms in his house that Dave is still living in and controlling the atmosphere that's associated. And we may actually have that reversed of what we probably should consider as part of the shared economy transformation of what this online rental option is. Turning our attention to long-term, room rental is legal, as is, we know that house rental. And that speaks to the assimilation that a renter has in the neighborhoods to get along with everybody else. Now,
But it's greater than a week.
pardon me. Oh yeah, it's longer than a week. It's 6 months. It's a semester at school, or it's a year-long rental house.
You have a week there, so.
Okay, Barbara, you had a
I
question?
said greater than a week.
But I mean, isn't it greater than 30 days or?
Greater than 90, 'cause that's
Or 90 days? It's not really a week.
Well, there's two different cutoffs. There's a cutoff for when a transient occupancy tax is imposed, and that's 90 consecutive days. And then there's the definition in, for example, the bed and breakfast and in the country inns, and those refer to weekly or daily rentals. Then there's somewhere else in the code that defines a lodging unit as 30 days. So, you know, there's a lot of moving parts here. And when we say it's illegal by interpretation, that is, again, assuming, of course, that you meet the definition of a family, which is no more than 4 unrelated people in the house. So there's too much of this to get into probably today, but general categories, you can't rent a room in your house for a day or a week. You probably can do it for some period longer than that, whether it be 30 days or 90 days. But there is no current legal prohibition against either renting your entire home or a room in your home long-term.
Barbara, you have something?
We had been saying, I think, in some of the presentations that we've been giving around town was that our zoning ordinance was essentially silent on rentals.
Right, and so they're permitted. They've been permitted.
We don't make a distinction in our zoning ordinance of either long-term or short-term.
Correct. And so when you're renting an entire property, an entire home, that's what that chart said. That's legal. There's nothing about that.
Bobby?
Yeah, thank you. I was asked by somebody that participates in this program. They found out that they had a tax obligation by reading about it in the paper. They just weren't aware. And I think an important component going forward, as we're looking, is that once we start figuring things out, an education process, so, you know, that the people that are, you know, renting are aware of, the liabilities that's going to be occurred. I think that's a critical component.
Johnny, you.
Well, that piggybacking kind of what Bobby's saying, I mean, we had the presentation that Phil gave last week or the week before, I can't remember, but, and we discussed that the ordinance that he had suggested, which really started the discovery process.
Which will find those people, I gather, that
So
you just referred to.
I would, I certainly think that as the big player in the Commonwealth, that we should have, a group that's really talking about the common needs of our particular city, and I think a lot of those will mesh with what's happening with the rest of the state. So I'm very supportive of this process, but, I would certainly wouldn't want to have that preclude what Phil had asked of us. I mean, I'm hoping we're going to be able to get that on in the near term so that at least within those discussions.
Tuesday.
You
Yeah.
know,
Well, we got that thing Tuesday. Okay.
Sir, this
What,
is,
what I was hoping is that next Tuesday we could make the appointments to this ad hoc committee. If you recall, I think I said that last week, let's get our thoughts together. And I even said I thought would get on it right away, because next week, I plan to be at the meeting next week, but I'm depending on air transportation. And I'm supposed to be here at noon Tuesday in Norfolk, but in case I don't, you know, I want you to be, it isn't because I didn't try, but, and I am on Delta.
My wife was on Delta yesterday, it wasn't good.
Delta in a non-destination
but-
airport.
But also, I am comfortable, you know, I have reached out to an individual who said he'd be glad to do this, and I'm going to bring his name to you, Jack Drescher. He's involved with the North Virginia Civic League, has already been active at Airbnb, and again, you all make this decision with or without me next Tuesday, but I might suggest him as being the chair of it, and he said he would do that. But again, that'll be a council decision, and I'll probably recommend him if I'm here. If not, I would ask y'all to give consideration of that.
And I've got Betsy for the realtors.
And you've reached out to the realtors, and they've suggested Betsy Atkinson. I just got that note. Yes, John?
In terms of the support for this group, I think if we're going to be successful in whatever we come up with and getting an attentive ear in other parts of the state, there's going to have to be some, because there's the industry side of this in Richmond as well. You're going to have someone on there who's letting people understand. It won't come from the panelists if you get them. Understanding the economics of the industries and all the things and the trends that are happening, so that you can talk that you aren't having adverse effects that people see as positive. So there is a positive aspect to the liquidity and using of an excess capacity in the marketplace. And you're gonna have to, even if you have a different view from that, you're gonna have people that understand that view and can breach that divide unemotionally and give the group the advice so they understand what's driving the behavior you're receiving, what's the marketplace that's there, so that whatever approach that we have is gonna has success in being received. And I think unless you have that perspective of how we got to where we're at and what the larger international as well as national things that are driving these economic behaviors, we're not going to be very successful in influencing the General Assembly when it meets.
But you know, I think, John, one of the things that we did say last week, though, is, and correct me if I'm wrong, that, hey, this isn't going away. I think that's what you're saying, but I think we said that last week. And we got to figure how to deal with it.
You don't have that kind of expertise in this group. They don't need to be a member. I'm just saying there needs to be the staff that's going to Tidewater, Old Dominion, or someplace, pull at the appropriate point, someone in there to provide that kind of insight to the group. That's what I was saying.
I'm sorry. Barbara?
Well, yeah, I've been working with this now for over a year, and I've learned so much about short-term rentals. But Sunday night, I Googled short-term rentals Virginia Beach, and I was absolutely astounded at the long list of sites that came up. Now, right now in Virginia Beach, this isn't something that's out there that might happen. It's blew my mind away. So I clicked on one of the sites that I thought it looked interesting, and I think it said something about 1,600 units that are available someplace, and it seemed to be something like VRBO, but there were just many pictures of units that are available all over this city right now. And so I clicked on one of the oceanfront houses to see more about it, and my computer went absolutely haywire. I thought it had crashed because the screen was telling me all kinds of horrible things that were dangerous about the site, and I cut off my computer and just hoped I would get rid of it. And I tell you that to tell you why I don't have more information about that site and the units being rented, because I wasn't about to go back to it and find out more. But I also tell you about it to say that it's a definite problem we've got right now, and I don't want us to get bogged down in another study committee. I think we need to do something very quickly to define short-term rentals and to define how they operate, in addition to the fact that they need to be paying the transient occupancy tax. And I can tell you, we don't have to invent the wheel. There are localities all over the country who are in the process of dealing with it or who have dealt with it, and there are many of them that even somebody like I can find on the computer. Because
If it doesn't
we
blow
are
up.
silent on short-term rentals, we don't have any regulations for them. And that's why they get to do what they do. But I know that we do have knowledge of the programs, and one of the things that really bothers me is that a young man was killed at a party in a short-term rental this spring.
That's right.
And I know of at least one other party that got out of hand and resulted in a shooting, because I remember it, but I also had an email from that property owner expressing his concern that this happened at his house. I remember, and I know all of you do, this email that Bob Mathias had in his this diagram that Bob Mathias had in his presentation last week called "When Single-Family Homes Become Motels," and all of the impacts. And then one of them that he added, quiet enjoyment. And I think that one is extremely important. Well, we heard from our residents at 5 public hearings during the week of July 18th. And I believe that since we do now have knowledge, we have knowledge of the problems and the issues, that the next tragedy that happens, we're going to bear some of the responsibility. It might be another shooting. It could be because of fire happened and there were too many people to get out of a house that didn't have enough exits, and there became a major tragedy. Whatever it is, there are so many things that can and do go wrong, and I just don't think we can bog ourselves down in waiting to do something to address these things. And again, I say we're not inventing the wheel. Just look at some of the many examples that are out there, and I do have another thing here that I downloaded yesterday from the Washingtonian that talks about D.C. suing the owner of an Airbnb house that's often used for parties, big parties. Well, I don't want us to get to that point. I think we need to do something because we've been told by our citizens, we've been told in these briefings, and I don't think we should just stick our heads in the sand and talk about whatever else that we have no control over. We definitely can make some control. And I think for that Old Dominion student who lost his life, and for all of our citizens who have told us that their quality of life has been totally destroyed because they live next to one of these, we need to act now. And I think we do need to move forward with that recommendation we had. And I think that's what you say we're going to get, to immediately adopt ordinances with appropriate penalties for lodging businesses that do not register as trustees for the transit or I guess it's transit occupancy tax. And I think we need to attach to that, or those ordinances, the other parameters that we're going to require for short-term rentals. And I think if we don't do that, we're being negligent.
Thank you very much. Other comments? Yes, sir. Go ahead.
We excluded short-term rentals from the public hearings. I know they transitioned into it, and it kind of all melded together in those beaches and waterways public input. But I thought maybe we would hold a couple of those associated with this as a standalone for the committee to do that. This is very similar to last year's.
What was adopted in January for an add-on to the legislative package.
Right, so that's a draft that we would also want to run by that committee, make sure that they've looked at it, and if there's anything they'd like to add to it. And so what would be the outcomes? First of all, would look at our ordinances and make recommendations associated with those. They would also prepare input for the General Assembly work group, and both those items would come forward to the City Council for approval. If we finalize our legislative agenda item, and I know this is fast, but we're predicting that this General Assembly work group will complete their work in October. That's best case that Bob's got, which means we really need to have our position refined, and by the end of September. Plus, we're going to bring the legislative agenda packet forward to you on 4 October.
6th of September.
No, the legislative. No, the draft, but we were going to go for final adoption in the first week in October. So there's some method to the madness of trying to get it done in the next 6.5, 7 weeks.
It's a good time frame. All right, anything else?
No, sir.
Any questions or comments? So we're going to take action on what Bill recommended.
Put our names together.
Last week, and next week we will also move forward with this committee, and I hope to be with you. Amelia, did you want something?
It was just, as I listened to all Barbara was saying on that committee, did you have a council liaison person like Barbara there or no?
It'd be up to the council to decide next Tuesday, and
Okay.
I don't think you want to object to it.
Recommendation?
Any other questions or comments? We thank you, and we'll adjourn.